It pretty much goes without saying, but computer-generated animation wouldn't be where it is today without the legendary studio Pixar. Hi, I'm Jacob with Channel Frederator, and we're here to give you 107 facts about Pixar. And before we get started, don't forget to subscribe and click the bell icon to become part of our notification squad. Despite popular belief, Pixar was not affiliated with Disney when it was created. The studio began with the graphics group of the computer division of Lucasfilm, created by George Lucas in 1979 to develop cutting-edge film technologies. This included everything from sound editing to laser film printing, and it was the test site for modern-day computer graphics. The graphics group, at this point part of the legendary effects team at Industrial Light and Magic, or ILM, was recruited from a group of animators and engineers working at the New York Institute of Technology. It consisted of Edwin E. Catmull, Al V. Ray Smith, and Jim Morris, who all had important roles to play in the development of Pixar. In 1982, ILM completed the Genesis effect sequence for Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. This sequence depicted a lifeless planet rapidly transforming into an oasis. This became the first completely computer-animated sequence in a feature film, which paved the way for the VFX industry to come. All of these artistic innovations eventually led to talks with Disney. For years, Catmull and Smith made annual trips to Disney Animation Studios, expressing interest in creating computer-animated films. Few people were on board, with the exception of John Lasseter, who cut his teeth on the Brave Little Toaster. Like many in the group, Lasseter was fixated on the idea of creating stories out of these strange computer polygons. This, at the time, required a whole lot of creative thinking. All this brainstorming led to the creation of Where the Wild Things Are, a test short in which hand-drawn characters moved around a three-dimensional set. While Disney was not too impressed with John Lasseter and Glenn Keane's collaboration, Catmull and Smith were intrigued. Lasseter joined ILM in 1984 as an interface designer, but worked well beyond that initial job's title. The same year at SIGGRAPH, an annual computer graphics conference, ILM premiered a partially completed version of their first short film, The Adventures of Andre and Wally B, as well as a prototype for the Pixar image computer. It wasn't the technology, but the craft that won the audience over. The art challenged the technology, and the technology inspired the art. This philosophy reflected the foundation of Pixar's approach to filmmaking. The innovations didn't just end there, though. The ILM team was also behind the stained glass night sequence that appeared in the film Young Sherlock Holmes in 1985. In 1986, Steve Jobs purchased the computer division from Lucasfilm for $5 million and launched it as an independent company named Pixar, based off of the computer with the same name. Pixar's first client was Disney for their collaborative work on CAPS, the computer animation production system, which painted hand-drawn animation digitally. CAPS was a success, and it managed to save Disney a lot of money. It's actually estimated that CAPS probably saved Disney about $6 million in development costs for The Lion King alone. That year also saw the completion and release of Luxo Jr. The film became the first three-dimensional computer-animated short film to be nominated for an Oscar, receiving a nomination for Best Animated Short Film. Luxo Jr. went on to become the mascot for Pixar. He's seen during the opening credits of all Pixar films since 1995's Toy Story. Pixar's second short film, Red's Dream, was also completed and released in 1986. A large portion of the film was rendered entirely on the Pixar image computer. The film debuted at SIGGRAPH and was met with praise. However, despite its warm reception, it still cost Steve Jobs a whole lot of money, and this would become a recurring problem for the Pixar team. Nevertheless, 1988 was still a big year for the studio, as their proprietary animation system was completed and put into use. The system was known as Marionette to the public, but in-house it was called MENVI. MENVI is short for Modeling Environment. Pixar's proprietary rendering program, RenderMan, came out shortly after. Both of these tools were utilized by Pixar in their third short film, Tin Toy. A partially completed version of Tin Toy was released to the public, and the finished film went on to its official debut at the Ottawa International Animation Festival later that year. Tin Toy would be the first CGI film to win an Oscar for Best Animated Short Film in the 1988 Academy Awards. While this brought a big spotlight to Pixar as a company, they still weren't making enough money to continue their independent filmmaking. In 1989, Pixar began making commercials as an alternate revenue stream. Their first commercial was an ad for Tropicana orange juice called Wake Up. The ad was directed by Lasseter and produced by Ralph Guggenheim. The pair would go on to have the same roles for the development phase of Toy Story in 1995. Eventually, Andrew Stanton and Pete Docter were brought on to work on additional commercials. By the end of 1990, Stanton and Docter had finished the shorts Quite a Package for Trident and Boxer for Listerine. If you recognize those names, you've got a good eye, or ear, or both. Stanton went on to direct and write Finding Nemo and WALL-E, receiving an Oscar for both films in the Best Animated Feature category. Stanton also directed 2 episodes of Stranger Things 2, which was released in October of 2017. In 1991, Disney and Pixar announced an agreement to make and distribute at least one computer-generated animated movie. Pixar would go on to create Toy Story for Disney, the world's first computer-animated feature film. Initially, Toy Story was going going to be a sequel to Tin Toy. In fact, it was going to be a 30-minute special called A Tin Toy Christmas. Disney later passed on the idea, but aspects of it, like a soft pink bear named Lotso, would eventually be adapted into other projects. It seems impossible to imagine Toy Story with any other title, but it was just one of many names that were tossed around. Would you have watched the movie if it was called The Cowboy and the Spaceman? Or Toys in the Hood? Yeah, we didn't think so. Tom Hanks is another staple of the series, but when Tom Hanks was too busy to voice Woody, he had his brother Jim step in to take care of it. Man, I wish I could call on my brother to replace me for stuff. Joss Whedon played a role in the writer's room for Toy Story and wrote one of Lasseter's favorite lines: "You are a sad, strange little man, and you have my pity." Whedon also created Rex, the neurotic Tyrannosaurus Rex. November 19th, 1993 was an important date in the development of Toy Story, but it was not an auspicious day. Production was halted after Disney execs saw a reel of the film. They found Woody and Buzz to be sarcastic and unlikable. Pixar returned to Disney 3 months later with a reworked script, and they were given the green light to continue the project. The film was released in 1995 and became the highest-grossing film of the year, earning $192 million domestically and $362 million worldwide, which, adjusted for inflation, is well over $500 million. Toy Story was nominated for an Academy Award in 1996 for Best Original Song, Best Original Score, and Best Original Screenplay. While the movie didn't bring home an Oscar in any of those categories, John Lasseter was honored with a Special Achievement Oscar from the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences for the creation of the first feature-length computer-animated film. In 1997, Disney and Pixar announced a new deal for the two companies that said they would produce 5 movies over the span of 10 years. Many of these film concepts originated at Hidden City Cafe in Point Richmond, California during the summer of 1994. The outlines and sketches that were written on napkins would go on to become A Bug's Life, Monsters Inc., Finding Nemo, and WALL-E. Hidden City Cafe was actually featured in the background of Monsters Inc. and on a license plate in Toy Story 2. Unfortunately, the cafe was closed in 2012, but lives on through many Pixar movies. Pixar also shouts out its employees' children by listing them in the credits. If you look closely, you'll see the names of any children born to members of the production team during the year preceding a film's release. Lee Unkrich, a director for numerous Pixar films, has said, quote, "If you ask any of us which movie we were making when one of our kids was born, we'll be able to tell you instantly. It's like our family lives are permanently woven into the movies. Thus, the production babies were born." A Bug's Life entered development a year before Toy Story was released. Steve Jobs described the film as a make-it-or-break-it feature since it was the follow-up to a blockbuster success. Production also had to make do with a smaller staff. While development cycles for Pixar films vary, the film with the shortest cycle for both production and development was A Bug's Life. The film was only in production for 3 years before it was released to the public, while films like Toy Story 3 took at least 4 years to develop and produce. While the development cycle was shorter for A Bug's Life, the film utilized almost 10 times the computing power that Toy Story did. The average frame took around 3 hours to render. Blooper reels in animated movies were unheard of, but let it be known that A Bug's Life was the first movie of its kind with bloopers at the end. The next Pixar film to include bloopers was Toy Story 2. While a majority of Pixar's team was working on A Bug's Life, there was talk of a Toy Story sequel. Catmull, Lasseter, and Guggenheim visited Joe Roth, then chairman of Walt Disney Studios. Roth was very receptive to the idea and gave them the go-ahead, but there was a caveat: the sequel would be a direct-to-video feature. Much of the Toy Story 2 staff were drawn from the Interactive Products Group, a production organization within the company devoted to computer games. The group put out the Toy Story Animated Storybook and the Toy Story Activity Center, two successful CD-ROM titles that were finished under extreme deadlines. Jobs initially believed that the Interactive Products Group could develop computer games that would sell over 10 million copies, like the direct-to-video films Disney was putting out. Pam Kerwin, the head of the Interactive Products Group, wasn't convinced. So Jobs dissolved the group and moved employees onto the Toy Story 2 production team, while Kerwin put together a short films team. When presenting story reels of Toy Story 2 to Roth and Peter Schneider at Disney, the pair became extremely interested in releasing the title into theaters. This interest, in combination with mounting production costs, led to Pixar renegotiating a deal with Disney and pushing the film for a traditional theatrical release. While doing a routine file cleanup, one of the animators on Toy Story 2 accidentally initiated the deletion of a root folder with assets for the film. By the time an associate technical director noticed, over 90% of the film was lost. This was over 2 years of work that wasn't properly backed up. Luckily, technical director Galen Sussman, who had been working from home to take care of her newborn child, had backups of the assets on her home computer. The team was able to recover all of those lost assets with the exception of a few days of work, and they were back on track. Toy Story 2 made its way into theaters on November 24th, 1999. It's the first film in history to be entirely created, mastered, and exhibited digitally. In 2007, it was revealed that Disney would purchase Pixar for $7.4 billion. At that point, Steve Jobs became a board member at Disney as he was the company's largest single shareholder with a stake of about 7.7%. Lasseter returned returned to Disney and was made Chief Creative Officer for the company's combined animation studios, while Edwin E. Cadmel, Pixar's president, would become president of Pixar and Walt Disney Animation Studios. Prior to Disney purchasing Pixar, Disney was moving forward with Toy Story 3 without Pixar's involvement. The agreement the two companies had signed in 2004 gave Disney the rights to all characters that were created by Pixar and gave them the right to make sequels to any Pixar films. The story would have seen Buzz sent off to Taiwan for repairs, with the other toys going out to find him. Production was ready to go, but Lasseter axed the development, dissolved Circle 7 Animation, the division tasked with production of the film, transferred most of the employees to Walt Disney Feature Animation, and started the storyline fresh. Pixar Animation Studios was built to weather an earthquake and other natural disasters and remain functional. The building was designed by Rutherford and Chakeen and has a seismic isolation system that consists of a combination of 125 high-damping rubber bearings and 82 slider bearings placed between the steel-framed ground floor and the foundation. Pixar animators are allowed to decorate their office space however they desire. In fact, the company pays for the basic infrastructure such as walls, basic desks, chairs, computer equipment, and so on. Anything else the animator wishes to do with the space will come out of their own pocket. One animator added a whole second floor to his office. Andrew Gordon, an animator, took this to a whole other level when he found a small door in his office that led to a hidden room behind an air vent. Andrew Stanton walked into Gordon's office at one point and found that it was empty, but the small door was open, and so he crawled through. After discovering Gordon in the hidden room, it was decided that it would become a speakeasy that was thereafter referred to as the Love Lounge. The speakeasy has been visited by many celebrities, and their signatures decorate the walls. Roy Disney, Tim Allen, and Steve Jobs visited the bar, but Jobs thought of it as a meditation room as he abstained from drinking. When Gordon was promoted and moved to a different office, his new space had another room conveniently hidden next to it. This time, the secret room was accessed by lifting the head of a William Shakespeare bust and pressing a button underneath. This provided access to the Lucky 7 Lounge. Maybe it's that creative environment that makes Pixar's films so good. While doing research for Finding Nemo, the animators found that the dull eyes of some of the fish were not conducive enough for character expression. Ever resourceful, they found another animal to model the sea critter's eyes on. Man's best friend, the dog. Pixar isn't infallible, though. For Finding Nemo, Megan Mullally was initially cast as Dory based on her voice from Will and Grace, which was very much high-pitched. When Mullally came to record her lines, the crew realized that it wasn't her normal voice and requested her to raise the pitch. When she refused, she was let go. Finding Nemo also had an unintended side effect on the environment. The clownfish in the movie were so well liked that demand for the species as pets increased exponentially. This led to excessive capture and sales of the popular fish, which in turn caused a 75% drop in population of clownfish around the Republic of Vanuatu. At one point in time, The Incredibles could have been released through Warner Brothers Animation. Brad Bird, the writer and director of the film, released his previous animated film, The Iron Giant, through the studio, but the WB Animation division dissolved before the idea could flourish. The Incredibles was a film that certain members of Pixar didn't think was feasible. Parts of the technical team thought this will take years and cost $500 million. The film was to feature humans, fire, and a massive number of sets, which were all considered too difficult for computer-generated animation at the time. However, Bird asked for animators that were considered black sheep and experimented with animation techniques that weren't exactly traditional to Pixar. The team was able to put their theories to the test and were able to deliver a movie that had 3 times the number of sets and all of the difficult-to-animate portions. The film actually spent less money per minute than Pixar's previous film, Finding Nemo. Pixar films were all rated G until 2004's The Incredibles. The film received a PG rating for action violence, which makes sense considering the whole superhero aspect of the movie. The Incredibles was the last Pixar movie officially released on VHS, though there have been sightings of a Cars VHS release which was supposedly exclusively available from the Disney Movie Club in 2007. A113, which refers to John Lasseter, Brad Bird, Pete Docter, and Andrew Stanton's former classroom at CalArts, is an Easter egg hidden in every Pixar film. Can you find all of them? While it would seem safe to assume that the Toy Story series is the bread and butter of Pixar, Cars has generated over $10 billion in merchandise sales alone. While working on concepts for Cars, animators drew over 40,000 sketches of automobiles for the film. Cars 3 was Brian Fee's first foray into directing for Pixar, but he's worked on multiple projects over the years. He's worked in the art department for the first 2 Cars films and also has credits on WALL-E, Ratatouille, and Monsters University. Cars 2 is the only Pixar film to be rated under 70% on Rotten Tomatoes, coming in at a measly 39%. The Toy Story trilogy, on the other hand, has Toy Story and Toy Story 2 listed at 100%, but Toy Story 3 only comes in at 99%. And alright, let's set the record straight here. Planes was a spin-off of the Cars series, however, it was not directly produced by Pixar, though Lasseter was a co-writer and executive producer for the first film. Development for Ratatouille started as early as 2000 when Jan Pinkava began drafting the original concepts of the film. Brad Bird took the role as co-director and writer for the project, going as far to intern at Thomas Keller's The French Laundry restaurant for the MasterChef experience. If you ever wondered why the food in Ratatouille looks so delicious, it's because all of it had to be made in real life. Over 270 pieces of food were created by Pixar filmmakers during production. Every food item had to be prepared and styled in a real kitchen, then photographed for reference, and then eaten. Artists usually have some kind of shorthand to save themselves time when working on a piece. During production of Ratatouille, the artists didn't give any of the human characters toes. Can you imagine what those feet look like? Pixar planned to sell Ratatouille wine as a tie-in to the film, but pulled it at the last minute. The California Wine Institute approached Disney and advised that the wine could violate advertising ethics, as it featured the titular character, Remy the Rat, on the label holding a glass of alcohol. In 2007, Ratatouille, a Brazilian computer graphics cartoon by Video Brinquedo, was released and reported as a rip-off of Ratatouille by IF Magazine. While some critics believe that this piece was derivative of Pixar's film, it seemed that Pixar didn't pursue any sort of legal action against them. The average Pixar film has anywhere from 50,000 to 75,000 storyboards from production. WALL-E broke the mold with over 125,000 storyboards. The first act remained largely unchanged, but the second and third acts went through multiple iterations, thus driving up the number. In 2009, Up became the first animated feature film to open the Cannes Film Festival. It was also nominated for an Academy Award for Best Picture, making it the second animated movie to ever do so after Beauty and the Beast. If you ever wondered if the team at Pixar did the math to find out how many balloons would have actually been needed to lift Carl's house in Up, you'll be happy to know that they did. Pete Docter, the co-director for the film, revealed that the technicians at Pixar estimated that 23.5 million balloons would be required to lift an 1,800 square foot house like Carl's. However, in the movie, only 20,622 balloons were used during the liftoff scene, and only 10,297 balloons were used during the floating scenes. We don't think that 23.5 million balloons would have fit on screen, and even if they did, it probably would have been excessive, so I guess we'll suspend our disbelief on this one, but you are walking on thin ice, Pixar. While the finished runtimes for Pixar movies run anywhere from 81 minutes to 120 minutes, the time it takes to animate is exponentially longer. During the production of Up, each animator produced an average of 4 seconds of animation per week. After the Up wrap party, the team that moved on to work on Toy Story 3 all shaved their heads for a fresh start on the new project. Speaking of shaved heads, Merida's hair in Brave took 3 years of study for the team at Pixar to animate. The scene where she removes her hood to show off the full volume of her hair took 2 months of work before it was considered satisfactory. And get this, the team created springs on a computer that ranged in sizes from short to long, fat to thin, stretched to compressed, and bouncy to stiff. They were then put into layers to create the curls for Merida's hair. That's over 1,500 hand-placed, sculpted individual curls. While Merida's hair in Brave was extremely complicated, Sully's hair in Monsters, Inc. was extremely voluminous. His fur has 25,336 key hairs, which are used to guide the motion and shape of the other 2.3 million hairs. Pixar created and registered an official tartan, a pattern for kilts with symbolic meaning for Clan Dunbrugh in Brave. You can look it up in the Scottish Registry of Tartans. Fans probably can't imagine anyone but John Goodman voicing Sully in Monsters, Inc., but Bill Murray was actually the first choice for the role. Apparently he tested and was interested, but producers of the film had trouble getting back in touch with him and moved on. The team behind Monsters University put each other through friendly hazing or initiation tests designed by department heads to keep in theme with the movie. There are over 400 characters in Monsters University, and each shot averages around 25 characters, which makes it Pixar's most populated film to date. Billy Crystal makes a wonderful Mike Wazowski, but he has a major regret with regards to Pixar. He was originally offered the role of Buzz Lightyear in Toy Story and passed. Randy Newman won his first Oscar for Monsters, Inc.'s closing song, If I Didn't Have You. He had previously been nominated 15 times in the Best Score and Best Song categories, but had never taken home the win. Apparently, Randy Newman was the Leonardo DiCaprio of the music Oscars. 90% of the monsters in Monsters, Inc. have Mike's tongue design. Try to spot the 10% that don't. Rendering for Pixar films has only gotten more intense as the years have gone by, as Monsters University took 100 million CPU hours to completely render. If this was done by one computer, it would have taken 10,000 years. While marketing Monsters University, Pixar created an admissions website for MU that provided the visitor with various information about the school. Kinda bummed I wasn't able to make it for homecoming weekend. Inside Out had a team of about 45 animators working on the film. This was about half the amount of previous Pixar films. Pixar wanted to ensure that certain story beats of Inside Out resonated with international viewers, so they remodeled and reanimated certain scenes. One instance was when Riley didn't want to eat broccoli as a child. After polling Japanese children, Pixar found that many Japanese children disliked eating green bell peppers. The team went in and adjusted 3 separate scenes for this change. The clown nightmare, Jangles, was a tribute to Joe Ranft, the late director of Cars and longtime Pixar employee. Joe Ranft passed away in 2005. Pixar released a feature film every year from 2006 until 2013. The cycle was broken in 2014 when delayed delays in production of The Good Dinosaur pushed the film back to a 2015 release. Both Inside Out and The Good Dinosaur were released in 2015 within 5 months of each other. Newt was a Pixar film announced in 2008 for a 2012 release that focused on the last 2 blue-footed newts that were forced together to save their species. Long story short, it never made it to the big screen. The long-standing reason for the cancellation was that the premise was too similar to Blue Sky's Rio, which was released in 2011. Ed Catmull brought up another reason for Newt's cancellation in 2014 during an interview with Fast Company. He noted that the premise just wasn't working, and DOCTER, who took over directorial duties for the project, had a better idea gestating. That idea blossomed into Inside Out. When Pixar approaches a new project, the team embarks on a research trip to gather as much data on the subject matter as possible. This can range from going to Paris for food research to depressing visits to a dump for Toy Story 3. We can guarantee that the employees at Pixar are never bored. In April of 2010, Pixar opened an expansion, Pixar Canada, in downtown Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. The studio would go on to produce 7 short films based on Toy Story and Cars characters. In October 2013, Pixar Canada was closed so that Pixar could refocus at its main office. In 2012, Pixar officially retired Menvy, its long-lived proprietary animation system, in favor of Presto, a new proprietary system named for their 2008 short film. The new system is still referred to as Menvy internally though, so it could get a little confusing. Brave was the studio's first feature film created with the new system. Fans of the scores of Pixar's films should keep an eye out for Pixar in Concert. The studio teamed up with the San Francisco Symphony in 2012 and launched the program. Fans attending the concerts are treated to symphonic renditions of scores from the various Pixar films that have been released. The concerts are still ongoing and their schedule is listed on Pixar's site. Pixar's proprietary software, RenderMan, saw its official release for non-commercial use in 2015. The program is available via Pixar Store and can be utilized for batch rendering or rendering with an artist seed. It will set you back around $500 though, with an annual maintenance fee of $200. John Ratzenberger has been a voice actor in every single Pixar film released. He's best known for his work on Cheers as Cliff Calvin, but has shown up in other animated shows and films such as Captain Planet and the Planeteers, The Simpsons, and the dub of Spirited Away. Pixar movies are rife with references to other films that the studio has developed, but there is one mainstay that appears in almost all of the films. The Pizza Planet delivery truck from the Toy Story series appears in every film with the exception of The Incredibles, which is weird because if there are any movies that shouldn't have it, they should be Brave or The Good Dinosaur, but there it is in both of them. Pixar's accolades continued to grow in 2009 when Lasseter, Bird, DOCTER, Stanton, and Unkrich were awarded with a Career Golden Lion Award during the Venice Film Festival. The award was presented to them by George Lucas, tying the animation studio back to their roots. Pixar has held a few different exhibitions over the years, allowing the general public to view internal original art. The first of these exhibitions was Pixar 20 Years of Animation, which opened in December of 2005 and ran until February of 2006 at the Museum of Modern Art in New York City. This exhibit had over 500 pieces of original art from Pixar Animation Studios. Pixar continued the tradition with the Pixar 25 Years of Animation exhibition, which debuted in California at the Oakland Museum of California from July 2010 to January 2011. The exhibition then went international and visited Hong Kong, Amsterdam, Paris, Madrid, Barcelona, and Zaragoza over the course of 2011 to 2015. Pixar's most recent release as of the making of this video is Coco. Coco premiered in Morelia, Mexico at the Morelia International Film Festival on October 20th of 2017 and was released the following week in Mexico just before Dia de los Muertos, the inspiration behind the film. Pixar has collected a total of 13 Academy Awards, 9 Golden Globes, and 11 Grammys as of 2017 for its feature films alone. Of 772 nominations, the studio has collected a total of 378 wins from multiple award shows. Here's to many more years of magic, innovation, and success. And The Incredibles 2 next year, finally! Who is hyped? Once again, I'm Jacob, and thanks for watching 107 Facts About Pixar. What's your favorite Pixar movie? Did you catch all of those Pizza Planet trucks? Comment below and let us know. And don't forget to click that bell icon to become part of our notification squad because we have new videos dropping every day, and make sure to subscribe because remember, Frederator loves you.